Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for May 7th, 2024. I want to begin with two announcements and then I'll get into the update from today. But let me start by saying that we have a special offer that will be in the description section, which is for you to sign up for free for a 1-month subscription to the EIR Daily Alert, the Executive Intelligence Review Daily Alert. My colleagues and I prepare each day an in-depth picture of what's happening in the world to counter not just the censorship and the lies, but also to get to the background, give you the background of what's actually going on, which otherwise remains hidden. So this is what I read every morning to help prepare these daily updates. And we'll make it available. You'll see it in the description section. And I would urge you to take advantage of this offer and to share the daily videos with your friends and colleagues so we can uplift the discussion in the country to have a much more prepared population to deal with the crises ahead. Now, secondly, this is actually a joyful event. It was 200 years ago today, May 7th, 1824, that the Ninth Symphony of Ludwig van Beethoven was given its premiere in Vienna. This premiere was conducted in part by Beethoven himself, even though he was totally deaf at the time. This powerful piece combines the poetry of Friedrich Schiller and his humanistic idea that all men should be brothers with Beethoven's masterful musical composition. And I would urge people to take some time today to listen to this and be uplifted by it. The story is that when the piece finished, the crowd was giving a raucous standing ovation, which Beethoven didn't hear because he was deaf, and the other conductor turned him around so he could see it. 5 standing ovations, and this piece has remained one of the great pieces of music to the present day. So today is the 200th anniversary of its premiere, and I highly recommend using this kind of classical background to get your mind straight at a time when everything about civilization seems to be going off the cliff. Now, there are 2 developments today I want to focus on. The first is what appears to be the long-delayed attack on Rafah in southern Gaza, with reports that Israel has begun the assault now on the area, starting with targeted strikes. And then secondly, the visit of China's President Xi Jinping to France. So in Rafah, prior to the assault on Rafah, the Israeli government shut down the Al Jazeera media network in Israel. This is sort of topping off the killing of more than 140 journalists. And they not only ordered the closure of the network, but they seized its broadcasting equipment. Obviously, they didn't want to have the story of what's going on in Rafah get out, as Al Jazeera is one of the more reliable journalistic organizations reporting from Gaza. Now, this was followed by the dropping of leaflets into eastern Rafah, ordering at least 100,000 Palestinians who were in that area to vacate the area, to go to a designated safety zone. Now, according to Vanessa Beeley, who's a reporter who has been covering this story uniquely, she's based in Syria, but she writes that the residents there who have been repeatedly uprooted are affected by this as a kind of psychological warfare, terrorism, because they've been forced to move from place to place, and they've seen that these so-called designated safe areas have been targeted in the past with mass killings and bombings. So we'll have more on this as it unfolds, but as of today, Israel claims they have captured the eastern, or the Palestinian side of the Rafah gate, and are therefore prepared to move to, as Netanyahu says, eliminate Hamas from Gaza. Now, the other story is the Xi Jinping trip to France. And the question is he going to find Macron, who's in a flight-forward manic frenzy, trying to assert French leadership in Europe by threatening to deploy French boots on the ground into Ukraine as part of an overall NATO strategy of confronting Putin. Macron is one of the people who has said that if Putin's not stopped in Ukraine, he'll conquer the rest of Europe. You hear that from people like Sikorsky, the lunatic foreign minister of Poland, whose wife is also, by the way, quite an insane woman, Anne Applebaum, who's a reporter. And they've been anti-Putin, anti-Russia for years. But what will Macron do? Now, there are some interesting signs that maybe he's not going to ratchet up the tension with China, but is looking to maybe move for joint efforts to break from some of the tension about the threat of a NATO-Russia military confrontation. Now, of course, the EU has an anti-China policy, which was challenged to some extent when Chancellor Scholz from Germany was in China in the last month. But there were constant attacks on China for overproducing. Ursula von der Leyen says China's policy is to overproduce to undermine the economies of China's trading partners. Well, overproducing means they actually have a productive economy. Why is that a problem? So this gets to the whole question of China-European relations. Now, when Blinken was in China, he was threatening the Chinese that they'd better stop providing so-called dual-use military technologies to Russia. But the Chinese pretty much looked at Blinken and was wondering, where the hell did this guy come from? Now, the visit of Xi Jinping is actually a celebration of 60 years of relations, diplomatic relations between France and China. These were restored in 1964 by Charles de Gaulle. And under de Gaulle, the desire was to have a better relationship between France and China. De Gaulle predicted that in the next century, China would again become the, quote, greatest power in the universe. And so that's partly the background here, the renewal of these diplomatic relations. So the question is, will there be discussions of how to get peace in the Middle East, peace in Ukraine? China and France in general have joined the call for the Israelis to stop the assault, to have a ceasefire, humanitarian aid, and a two-state solution. How far that will go will be seen over the next couple of days. But then the second issue is, what about Ukraine, where the Chinese have talked about a peace plan, as opposed to Macron, who's talking about gearing up with NATO troops in Ukraine. Now, Xi had an op-ed in Le Figaro with 3 messages. He said, first of all, we need to promote together peace and development throughout the world. And this, of course, could be a reference to China's Belt and Road Initiative, to coordination between France and China, whether in Southwest Asia, Africa, East Asia. And if so, that would be a very positive move. Secondly, expand trade relations. Take advantage of the innovation that is underway in China. Have mutual investment, and not having cutbacks or not having threats to China that there'll be sanctions. So this is another possible area for improvement. And then finally, Xi said, we have to work for peace and stability. And he emphasized China's efforts for peaceful resolution in Ukraine. Now, with Macron, you never know, because he goes hot and cold. One day he's Mr. Reasonable. He's talking to Putin. The next day he's echoing Blinken and others that Putin is a dictator who's about to extend Russian autocracy over all of Europe. So we'll see what comes out of this. But the important thing is be on alert. We have the mobilization on the campuses continuing against the Israeli occupation of Gaza. There's the international motion of the Global South to insist that there be stable, fair relations when it comes to trade and finance. So there's a lot that's moving for the positive. But what's necessary is for voices in the West to call for joint efforts between the West and nations such as the BRICS Alliance for Development, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the African Union. There's enormous potential for collaboration as opposed to mutual and assured destruction. So let's see if this Macron mission can get things moving in that direction. Listen to Beethoven today, and I'll see you again tomorrow.